G'day everyone, how's it going? So I told myself that I'd be cleaning the shed today, but the plan has changed because there's more priorities at hand. I'm going to be giving the Hilux a full service today. The other day I did the front shocks on the Hilux. I haven't shown you guys yet, so I'm probably going to tie that into the start of the video. It was relatively simple, a couple of bolts, few annoying parts here and there, but the old ones that came off it, the old shocks, you could compress them by hand and they wouldn't even make an attempt at extending again. I've got the back shocks up here, so I'm not sponsored, trying not to show the brands, but hopefully they'll make the ride the tiniest bit better considering it's leaf sprung and torsion bar, which is the bane of existence in society today. We've run into a hurdle, so the bolt up here that you've got to undo just spins the whole shock like that. I've tried holding onto the top up here with a shifter and it doesn't, no, I haven't seemed to be able to get it, so I don't know what I'm going to do. Don't want to damage it, and it works, so I might as well just leave it. Got the new one, got the old one, new one. Good rebound. This old one. Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and make a little small assumption that this one isn't working very well. For the engine oil I'll be running, I'll be using 15W50. Normally I run 15W40. I've run 15W45 in the past, and what I've noticed is if I do a bunch of pulls, I'll notice that my oil pressure at idle drops down a couple of psi, meaning that once the oil gets a bunch more heat into it and lowers the viscosity, it lowers the overall oil pressure. So I'm fooling around trying to find an oil that's got a lower viscosity, or a higher viscosity, sorry, at higher temperatures, just so I can keep my oil pressure up, because oil pressure can be the killer of 3RZs. Number 3 is known to let the crank go, or sorry, let the rod bearing go, which is not good. I've got my oil filter, the high flow one. I don't think it actually matters, as long as you've had the engine apart and cleaned out the crankcase and oil pan perfectly, you can just run the normal oil filter and you should be fine. For the gearbox oil, just 80W90. I think you can run either 75 or 80W90, doesn't really matter. Whatever it is, it'll be better than what's in it now, since I've never changed it in like the 4 years I've owned it. And for the diff oil, I'm using 75W90. That's because I've got a True Track limited slip diff in there. I googled quickly and True Track recommend 80W90, but I've chosen 75 because there's going to be a high viscosity at the lower temperatures, just so that it'll hopefully maybe lock up a little bit better. I don't really know. Gear oil's gear oil, and you know, whatever it is, it's probably going to be better than what comes out of it. So that being said, whenever you're doing a service like this, be as vigilant as possible and use it as a time to identify any little things that could be a problem down the track. So when you get the oil out into the oil pan, have a swish around, look for any bits of metal, and yeah, have a look around under the car for anything, any bits of rust or anything that could be a problem. I've also got my valve spring compressor, so that's probably what I'm going to use to put the new valve springs in. You can spin the factory valve springs up pretty high. I've heard people that spin them to $6,000 or more even. There's the chance that when you spin the motor up to the higher RPM, more than the factory, with the factory valve springs in, there's a chance for valve float, which is when the valves start to sort of shimmy around like that. Now that's all well and good, but it is a way to absolutely destroy the valve seats that you've lapped in. So yeah, I've just decided, and I found some valve springs online, so I'm going to fit them in when I get the chance, and then I'm going to put the boost controller on my motor and absolutely send the dog. But anyway, the first thing I'm going to do, I've driven the car around a little bit, just got a little bit of heat into it, so I'm going to drain out all of the engine oil now and chuck the new filter on and engine oil first, because heat doesn't technically matter as much with the gearbox. It does a bit, but not enough for me to care. Yeah, so engine oil, gearbox, then diff oil. Excuse the work overalls, but it's the only ones I want to get dirty. One or two things to make any oil changing job a little bit nicer. Some rubber gloves, some safety glasses, and a very nice new tool I got. Just a little shaped spanner for the oil filter itself. The oil filters on the 3RZs, they sit right near one of the engine mounts, and it's really impossible to get a good grip as well as a good angle to get both your hands on it to undo the filter. So having one of these made it a really quick job last time compared to the swearing and shouting that it was the time previous. If you're brave enough with an RZ, you can do the whole job without jacking the car up, which is an absolute benefit. To 14mm. Now's also the time to inspect the crush washer that's on the back of your sump plug. I'd say mine's in good shape, so I'm going to reuse it. Just give it a little nip, nothing too tight. Now onto the oil filter. So you can see up in there the oil filter just sits above the cross member here, which is rather annoying, which is why I recommend that tool so much, because you can get in there with an extension and a ratchet and just crack it loose and then nip it up. So with your brand new oil filter, always your first course of action is to fill it with oil and then lube up the gasket. So yeah, always make sure that the O-ring dislodges from the old oil filter, because mine hadn't. Mine was stuck to the oil filter housing. And so once you've got your old oil out, before you decant it into your old container, just have a sift through it and look for any metal shavings in it. You can get a magnet out, but yeah, mine looked alright. If you put it in sunlight and swish it around, you'll see any metal usually. In my video just after the engine rebuild and running it in, I showed swishing the oil around, you could see visible little tiny bits of metal. That was from the piston rings wearing in. But yeah, it feels alright, nothing big, and there was no real big parts on the oil filter plug, on the oil plug either. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to decant it into my old bottle now and get ready to recycle it. This is the most tedious part of the process, but make sure you do it, otherwise you'll do what I did one time and kick the oil pan and spill it everywhere and just really piss yourself off. Okay, so the sump's back on, the sump plug's tight and the new oil filter's on. I showed you, make sure to fill the oil filter with a bit of oil first and be careful about the O-ring on it. So now I'm going to fill the engine with oil. I think it takes about I can usually get a full oil change out of one of these 5 litre canisters, so I'll give it about 4 litres, check on the dipstick, then top it up to suit. And then a habit I've always got into is before you go to start it for the first time, either disconnect all your spark plugs, or I've got a link ECU so I can just stop the spark event and just crank on it a bunch, so to make sure that you've primed all the oil galleries before the engine starts running. I had an old Hyundai Excel, and when I did one of the oil changes on that, when I started it for the first time, I heard it run dry and it made this awful sound. So yeah, just try and get into the habit of not doing that. See if I'm good enough. Ooh. Now the most annoying thing is I've hidden my dipstick in behind where the intercooler pipe is, so it's a bit of a fiddle to get in and out, but just let the oil settle for a minute. It's always difficult to see with brand new oil, but you can see it's about there, which is about halfway up, so I'll give it a little top up, and then when I take it for the first drive, I'll drive around a bit and then double check it after. Okay, so the engine oil's in, and I've thought for a minute and I've made the executive decision I'm not going to do the gearbox oil. Now why would I not do the gearbox oil? Well, that's because in this car there's a W56 transmission. It's an aluminium housing, aluminium case transmission, and they are notoriously weak. You can pop them with the factory power if you do enough abusive clutch kicks and all that fun stuff. Now, in my shed, this here is an R150F, so this is a 4-wheel drive gearbox with the transfer case here that came off a 5VZFE Prado. Now the gearbox that I want, that I need for my car, is the gearbox that came off the next model Hilux, the 2TRFE 2.7 VVT Hilux. That had an R150 2-wheel drive gearbox. So that's an R series, which means it's steel case, really strong, and because it's the 2TR, the bell housing will mate up and bolt the exact same bolt pattern as the 3RZ, which is perfect. The only thing that you need as well as the 2-wheel drive gearbox is the tail shaft, which I'll probably get off a wrecked car. I've been trying to suss one for ages. Every wrecker wants $1.5 to $2 grand for a gearbox that's done like 100,000 Ks on it, which is insane. The only reason I've got this one here is this 4-wheel drive gearbox on Marketplace was $600, so whenever you see a deal like this, just bloody jump on it because they're so good. The R150, when I eventually get one, takes the same oil as that, so I'm just going to keep this oil, keep it in stock, so that when I eventually do get the new gearbox and I do all of the changing around and modifying so that I can fit it up, I'll just be able to whack this batch of oil in and know it's good to start with. As I've said, this one's probably not got a lot of life left in it, so it'll be like polishing a turd at this point, I think. What I am going to do is do the Diff Oil though, because my Diff's a little bit whiny. I believe that's because this is the first Diff I've ever built, so I think I blued it okay, but I'd say there was a slight bit too much backlash on the ring and the pinion gear, so there's a little bit of noise just there. But yeah, we'll drain the oil out, see what it looks like, and then slap this stuff in, see if it's any better. So before you do any diff work, just make sure that your filler plug undoes. The way you fill these diffs is you open the filler plug, drain all the oil out, put the sump plug back in, and then fill it until the oil starts to dribble out here, because that way the bottom half is full, and then when you're driving, the ring gear will sling it all around and get everything nice and lubricated. That smells funky. It all still looks in pretty good nick, but we'll have to look at it once the sunlight goes on it. Well, that's kind of worrying. You pull the sun plug out, you can see there's ooh, bit of a metal paste. I'm going to go ahead and say that that's, fingers crossed, there from last time I did the diff, but never know. Okay, so this is the diff oil out in the sun. You can see there's a rather severe amount of metallic substance in there. So that's, yeah, definitely metal. Fingers crossed that's just it wearing itself in. If it's out on me, that'll be rather annoying, but I guess that's how you learn how to do diffs. Trial and error.